Good afternoon. My name is Aarti Holla-Maini and I'm Director of UNOOSA, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. My thanks to Meridian International for inviting me to speak at its Space Diplomacy Forum, and I'm very sorry that I can't be with you there in person. Let me start by saying a few words about UNOOSA and Vienna, the home of multilateral space diplomacy. Most people wonder why on earth the UN has an office for space and how can it possibly do anything that's relevant to the space sector. I was very much one of those people until I joined UNOOSA 2.5 years ago. Well, the UN does have a lot to do with the space sector, and both UNOOSA and COPUOS, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, are very relevant. UNOOSA is secretariat to COPUOS, whose treaties, principles, guidelines and resolutions have enabled the space economy that we know today. The committee has continued to deliver across 6 decades, evolving with the political climate and driving decisions on space governance that are ultimately reflected in national regulation and licensing procedures. It's UNOOSA's job to support the committee as it seeks to define governance for today's expanding space ecosystem. That means serving as secretariat, but also going beyond and providing support to diplomats who are not necessarily space experts, helping them gain a better understanding of topics that can be technical and complex. Let me give you an example of how we do this. I've just returned from the Philippines, where together with the Philippine and Thai space agencies, UNOOSA co-organized a workshop on space situational awareness and space traffic coordination for member states of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. We invited various satellite operators to participate to explain how they keep their assets in space safe. We had SSA service providers explain how they track objects in space from Earth and using space-based sensors. We ran a workshop on the basics of SSA, and together with a commercial provider, we ran a tabletop exercise to really involve the government representatives and give them a sense of what collision avoidance means in practice, the time pressure, the decision-making required, and most importantly, the need to share information and coordinate between operators. Given that so many developments in the space sector are driven by private entities, it's impossible to take meaningful decisions on space governance without a proper understanding of them. So I leverage my industry background to make sure that we plug in industry players to tap into the wealth of operational expertise that they have wherever it's valuable to do so. The office is also a capacity builder in a broader sense. We have a wide range of programs to support member states, from supporting them in leveraging satellite data for water management, agriculture or disaster preparedness, to giving them guidance and training, for example, on their rights and obligations under space law, encouraging them to ratify the various space treaties, and working hand in hand with them to help them put their space law and policy into place. But it's not just about space law. COPUOS today is responding to the call to action made to it by heads of state in September 2024 with the Pact for the Future, where they invited the committee to work on new frameworks for space traffic, space resources and space debris. For space traffic, the committee has established an expert group on SSA, and that foresees the involvement of industry. Member states are sharing national best practices, exploring what types of data would be beneficial to share, how and with whom, and discussing modalities for collecting operator contact information. All of this are vital steps towards global space traffic coordination. For space resources, the member states are advancing well on their negotiations on a set of draft principles on the legal aspects of space resource utilization. And for space debris, UNOOSA is encouraging countries like Japan, who already have guidelines for a license for on-orbit servicing, to champion those guidelines as a basis for global guidelines in COPUOS, so that ADR and OOS can be recognized as legitimate global activities in the hope that this helps the market to scale and grow. So much of our work is also to help member states understand and implement existing guidelines, like the famous LTS guidelines of 2019 and the Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines. People often point the finger at the UN and say it has no teeth and we need binding rules. Well, whether it's a binding treaty or non-binding guidelines, they are both just paper unless they are implemented nationally, and they need to be because they embody the shared political will of states party to COPUOS. In other news, UNOOSA and COPUOS are also working on lunar sustainability. We hosted last September a conference on the commercial lunar landscape and policy needs to bring industry voices to Vienna to discuss both lunar surface and orbit challenges and opportunities. We did this event specifically for the growing lunar industry. And I remember when we invited them, so many companies said, why would we go to a UN conference? It was eye-opening for them to realize, at least for those in the United States, that they would ultimately require a license from the Office of Space Commerce, who are highly likely to implement what is agreed in COPUOS, because the US Department of State is absolutely very engaged in the multilateral space governance. Industry actors assume that it's just their national government that's taking these decisions. They don't realize there's a whole layer of international cooperation that goes on behind it. So our conference was industry's one opportunity to hear what's being discussed and influence it. The latest on lunar is that we hosted a side event with the UK and Japan on lunar debris and disposal at COPUOS's Scientific and Technical Subcommittee meeting. In parallel, there was also a workshop taking place on lunar PNT. As the topics requiring COPUOS to engage and act increase, we try to be creative to help member states come to grips with the critical topics. During the last STSC meeting, we organised an industry symposium where we launched the UN Space Debates, a new dynamic format of dialogue designed to complement the more formal COPUOS proceedings, where we brought industry representatives and invited them to make their case for or against a given proposition. So both within the committee and its subsidiary bodies, and as part of our mandate to build capacity among member states, UNOOSA is actively engaged in advancing space diplomacy and promoting efforts that will improve space sustainability and support operational safety for all space actors. Whether you represent a space agency, a member state, an NGO, or the private sector, UNOOSA welcomes the opportunity to work with all interested stakeholders, so please reach out. Thank you again for allowing me to join you this afternoon, and I look forward to the opportunity to engage in Vienna, Washington, or elsewhere on these and other critical space issues. Thank you.